Welcome to Dusky Lore. Close your eyes, dim the lights, and listen closely as the shadows begin to speak. Story 1. In my unit, we had a saying. Some ghosts do not haunt buildings, they haunt duty. I was a squad leader in the United States Army Infantry, MOS 11B. I spent enough time at Fort Polk to know which buildings creaked only because of the humidity, which dining facilities were better avoided after 1800, and which barracks had history, because on every base there is at least one like that. Ours was an old brick building tucked behind the DeFac. It had a rusted fire escape and a half-faded sign that barely read BL 612. It was used mostly for overflow, new arrivals, reclassified soldiers, or recycled recruits. Nothing special. 20 bunks lined wall to wall, foot lockers at the base of each one, and mirrors bolted above every sink in the latrine. I had passed through there dozens of times over the years. No air conditioning, a moldy smell in the back corner, and flickering fluorescent lights. But there was always one thing that stood out. The cot by the back window. It was made differently. Not sloppy, just different. No hospital corners, no rolled towel, no folded physical training uniform. Just a blanket pulled perfectly tight, a single pillow, and dog tags placed right in the center. The strangest part was that no one was ever assigned to it. It did not matter what the roster said. Even when the building was full, that bunk stayed empty. Nobody wanted it. Nobody touched it. In fact, hardly anyone talked about it unless they had to spend the night there. The first time I noticed something was wrong was during a CQ shift with a young specialist, an NCO from Echo Company. It was a little after 4 o'clock. We were doing a routine round before first formation, making sure the lights were out and nobody had slipped away during the night. We stepped into the latrine and stopped. There was someone in there. We heard him, the soft sound of a razor shaving. I shouted, "Hey, you've got 10 minutes to first call, move." Nothing. We turned the corner, and there he was, clear as day. Uniform on, regulation underwear, shaving in front of the mirror like nothing was wrong. He did not flinch, just kept dragging the razor along his jaw on autopilot. But the strange thing was that he had no gear in sight. No shaving kit, no towel, nothing. And the air in there felt heavy, as if nobody had used that space in a long time. The specialist tried to tap him on the shoulder, but before he could get close, the guy turned toward the mirror and vanished. No smoke, no light, no sound. He was simply gone. We checked every stall, every locker, every corner. We checked the roster and the sign-in log. That night, only 19 soldiers were assigned to that building. With him, that made 20. That morning, I reviewed the guard logs from the previous 6 months. More than a dozen entries with vague notes, like whoever wrote them did not want to make it too clear. Unidentified presence at sink, 0410. Noises in latrine, no personnel present. One bed made with tags visible, unassigned. Always the same bunk, same hour, same corner. One old entry, almost 2 years old, caught my attention. It was written in red ink, signed by a first sergeant who had already retired before my time. "That is his bed. Do not assign it. Leave him alone." No name, no number, nothing else. Just that. I started asking around quietly. The old-timers, the retirees still living near the base. One of them, a Vietnam veteran named Palmer, finally gave me a lead. He said there had been a soldier, Private First Class Darnell Harris, who trained at Fort Polk in the late 90s. He was infantry, and during a dawn ruck march, he went down with all his gear on. Head injury. He died before the medevac bird could get there. His assigned bunk was the one in back by the window. Bed number 20. They kept the room closed for 6 months after the accident. When they reopened it, that bed was never assigned again. It became an unwritten rule among the cadre. Leave that cot alone. Even the civilians knew it. The cleaning crews changed every sheet except his. The laundry contractor sent only 19 sets of bedding, even though there were 20 bunks. And every now and then, especially during the winter cycles, when the recruit numbers dropped, it would be heard again. Just before dawn, the sound of a man shaving, getting ready, following orders even after death. I never reported it. There is no box for that in standard procedure. No slot for it on the training calendar either. But on the last night before my final transfer, I went into the barracks after curfew, checked that everything was locked down, stood beside his bed, and saluted him. Not out of fear, not out of superstition, but out of respect. Some soldiers die in combat, others in training, and a few simply never leave their post. And Soldier Harris still shows up for formation. Hello, friends. Thank you for watching this story. A special greeting to all our subscribers. You keep these unsettling stories alive. But there is one detail. Only 30% of the people who watch the channel are subscribed. If you enjoy our content, subscribing helps us more than you can imagine. It only takes a second and makes a huge difference. And while you are here, leave a like and share to keep the chills going. Thanks again. You make this possible. Story 2. There are nights you never forget. Not when you have worn the uniform long enough. Not when you have stood watch in places where the silence weighs more than gunfire. Korea was one of those places for me. Camp Boniface, just south of the demilitarized zone. For those who have never been that close to the line. I served there in 2007 as part of a joint security force along the border, 2nd Infantry Battalion. On paper, our mission was routine, surveillance, presence patrols, and readiness as a quick reaction force in case things escalated. But the demilitarized zone is never routine. The tension is not measured in daily reports. You feel it in the air and your bones in the way people hold their breath. That night I was part of a 4-man patrol walking a stretch of the northern perimeter near the joint security area. The orders were simple. Inspect a section of fencing where ground sensors had been triggered a few days earlier, supposedly by wildlife. Intelligence did not expect anything serious, but higher command wanted visual confirmation. Nothing out of the ordinary. Check report and keep moving. It was late, cold, maybe around 38 or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. I remember seeing my breath hanging in front of me, as if it did not want to move either. We walked in a staggered formation. 2 up front, 2 behind with about 10 meters of spacing. Minimal communication, just the crunch of boots on frost and that dull ringing in your ears that constant alertness leaves behind. Around 8 p.m., we reached the edge of the sector and knelt down while one of the guys communicated the Tactical Operations Center. That was when Rodriguez, the patrol leader that night, saw her. Just beyond the tree line, about 20 meters away. It was a little girl, barefoot, thin, pale. She could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She wore something like a tattered white tunic that hung down to her knees. She did not move. She had no expression at all. She was just standing there looking at us. Rodriguez gave the signal to halt. I dropped to one knee, my hand on my M4, following his line of sight. And yes, she was there. And this is where things turn strange, though not in the way movies show it. Nobody screamed, nothing floated. The radios did not crackle with interference or distorted voices. We simply saw her. 4 trained soldiers frozen, staring. The lieutenant gave the order to move in. We advanced slowly, Rodriguez and I in front, the other 2 covering from behind. 10 steps later, I blinked, and she was gone. Not a whisper, not a movement. Nothing. We spread out, used thermals, checked the ground. Everything was clear. The sensors showed no activity. The portable FLIR camera picked up a little residual heat in the lower branches, but no human shape. We reported it to the Tactical Operations Center. It was logged as an unverified sighting, probably wildlife or a lost civilian. But we knew it was not that. Children do not just disappear, and certainly not barefoot in the middle of the woods, 20 meters from a sensor-covered military fence. And that is when it settles into your stomach. That area had been cleared weeks earlier. The engineers had swept for mines alongside the South Korean military. No civilian was allowed anywhere near that point. No little girl could have made it that far without triggering something, without leaving tracks, without a thermal trail, without anything. During the next 48 hours, no activity was detected. After that incident, every patrol in that sector became stricter. More eyes, less spacing between men. No assumptions about just animals. I did not talk about it much. In the Army, you learn quickly what you can report and what things simply get labeled as fatigue or clouded judgment. But I know what I saw. Rodriguez saw her too. The lieutenant did as well. We all wrote separate statements. They matched. I do not believe in ghosts. But that was something. Something no sensor could register. Something that was there between two nations still technically at war, as if it belonged to neither one. And sometimes when I close my eyes too long on a cold night, I still see her. Not out of fear, but because some visions do not fade. They just remain there silent, watching from between the trees. Story 3. Fallujah was not just another deployment. It was a pressure cooker. Blistering heat, unforgiving terrain, and traps everywhere. Some made by men, and others by the mind. That place either hardened you or broke you. There was no middle ground. I was serving with 1st Battalion, 8th Marines in 2006. Just before we rotated back home, we were running daily patrols through a district southwest of the city. The routine was always the same. Sweep for possible improvised explosive devices, clear houses one by one, and escort convoys through the narrowest choke points. It was on one of those missions that I met Sergeant Walker, a textbook infantry marine, formerly recon, transferred to line duty after a leg injury. He walked with a slight limp, but you barely noticed it under pressure. Always calm, always sharp, always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. One morning during a routine sweep, Walker lagged behind a little. Not carelessly, but deliberately, like he had seen something. We were near a ruined courtyard, one that had taken fire weeks earlier. He crouched in the dust and picked something up between his fingers. A dog tag. Nothing unusual, except for one detail. It had no name, no blood type, no service number. Nothing linking it to anyone in the military. Just 2 words stamped into it with uneven, clumsy, almost trembling strikes. Stay still. He turned it over. The back was completely blank. We figured it was probably some sick joke left behind by insurgents, a piece of psychological warfare, or maybe it belonged to a contractor with a dark sense of humor. Whatever it was, Walker pocketed it without a word and did not mention it again. Not until later. That day we were on foot patrol through the industrial zone near Route Henry. It was midday, clear skies, everything normal, until Walker stopped dead. I remember exactly how he turned to me and said, "It's cold again." I thought he meant the wind. But then he pulled the tag out from under his body armor, held it up in front of me, and I swear it was freezing. Not cool, not lukewarm. Cold like it had been sitting in ice water. There was no shade, no breeze, no moisture. Just the dry desert heat wrapped around everything. We took cover instinctively. 47 seconds later, one of the men up front triggered a buried pressure plate. Explosion. A secondary device had been chained under the rubble. We lost a Humvee, 2 wounded. It could have been much worse. From that day on, Walker never went outside the wire without that tag. He wore it on a separate chain hidden under his blouse. He never bragged about it, never told stories. He only said it had a way of warning him. Sometimes it turned cold, sometimes it did not. But every time it did, we doubled down on caution. And more than once we avoided an ambush because of it. Walker started taking notes. Times, temperatures, coordinates. I saw his notebook once. Tight, meticulous handwriting. Tag cold, 7:31, Sector 6, D, route altered. That kind of entry, until the day it gave no warning. We were running a sweep near a drainage culvert outside the city in an old checkpoint area. Walker said nothing. No change, no chill, nothing. The blast came from an overpass. Walker did not survive. When we recovered his gear, the notebook was still intact. The last entry was from the night before. No mention of the tag. We sent all of his belongings home with his personal effects, but the tag was not listed in the inventory. It was not on his uniform, not in his pack, not in the aid bag, not in the wrecked vehicle. Gone. I never saw it again. The strangest part happened weeks later, when the recovered ammunition fragments were analyzed. Most of the shrapnel had Arabic markings, serial numbers, dates, manufacturer stamps. But one fragment, just one, had something else carved into the metal in rough English along the edge. Stay still. I still think about that. Not because I believe in ghosts or curses. I do not. But in war, some warnings do not come through the chain of command. They come in silence, unmarked, and as cold as death itself. Story 4. We were getting ready for deployment to Iraq. Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 56th Infantry. It was early 2009 at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. That pre-deployment phase when everything moves fast. Gear inspections, weapons assignments, final physical evaluations, briefings, vaccinations, family days. The atmosphere felt heavy. We were all tense, even the quiet ones. There were 30 men in the platoon, 3 squads, full strength. No stragglers, no replacements, no casualties. We had been training together for months, and we knew each other's routines, marching cadence, gestures, even the way each man stood at ease. That kind of familiarity that only comes from sweating through the same drills under the same chain of command. There was nothing unusual about that morning's formation. Final gear check, inspection with the first sergeant, and a visit from headquarters. An old-school veteran type already retired once but brought back as a contractor. He walked like he was still on active duty. We all called him Gunny, even though technically he was Army. You know the type. It was just after 6 o'clock. The fog was still hanging low over the field. We were standing in formation, 4 straight rows, separated by squads, weapons slung, rucks at our feet. The company captain and Gunny were making the final inspection before we moved toward the armory. I was in the 3rd row, second from the end, and that was when it happened. Gunny stopped near the far end and stared silently at the 4th row. He did not say anything for several seconds. He just kept looking. Then he turned to our platoon sergeant and asked, "Who's the guy at the end?" We all looked that way, and that was when it got strange, because there was nobody there. Empty space. The last man in that row was Private First Class Ramirez. His boots marked the end of the line, and there was absolutely no one beyond him. Gunny stepped forward like he was trying to focus better. He stayed silent for another full minute. Finally, he muttered, "I thought I saw one more." The platoon sergeant let out a light laugh and blamed it on early morning fatigue or the fog, but Gunny did not laugh. He just gave a short nod and kept walking. We went on with the routine, but I never forgot it, and Ramirez did not either. Later, he said that for the entire formation, he had felt like someone was standing right beside him, close enough that he could hear the person breathing. That same afternoon, our XO requested the security footage from the company parking lot. Nothing unusual at first. Checking spacing, gear layout, vehicle arrival times, administrative stuff. But then the captain called a private meeting with the platoon leaders and the first sergeant. We did not hear what was said, but the faces when they came out said enough. Serious expressions, fewer jokes, more formality. That night, Squad Sergeant Wilkins pulled a few of us aside. "Keep this to yourselves," he said, but Gunny wasn't seeing things, and he told us what the camera had shown. From the elevated angle over the west lot, the video was clear. Grainy, yes, but clear enough to count heads by movement and shadows. At 6:04, while we were standing in formation, there were 31 shadows, 30 soldiers, and one more. That extra shadow was standing at the very end of the fourth row, motionless, upright, back straight, exactly where Gunny had been looking. And then it moved. It stepped backward 2 full paces and disappeared. No blur, no transition, no image glitch. It just faded out. The strangest part was the timestamp. The counter on the video flickered for half a second, from 6:04:21 to 6:04:24, then back to 6:04:22, as if time itself had stumbled. They checked attendance and interviewed everyone. 30 soldiers, all accounted for. Nobody unassigned, nobody in civilian clothes, nobody sneaking in. Nothing that explained that 31st shadow. We were told to forget it, not to spread rumors before deployment, but it stayed with us. Even more so after what happened. 2 weeks later, already in Iraq, we lost one of our own. Same row, same place where the shadow had appeared. Private First Class Ramirez. He was killed by a sniper round near Balad during a security patrol. He was 2 steps out of formation when it happened. I was less than a meter behind him. His last words were, "I thought I heard someone say my name." Nobody had said it. Only radio static. I am not telling this to scare anyone. I do not know what that shadow was. Maybe Gunny's tired eyes were not as unreliable as we thought. Maybe it was a camera malfunction, an illusion caused by the fog, or by the exhausted minds of men about to go to war. But in our unit, we remember it. And every time we form up, whether for a memorial run or a veterans reunion, we leave a space at the end of the room. Not out of fear, out of respect. Story 5. When you leave the battlefield, you do not always leave the war behind. Some of us hang up the uniform, but there are parts of the job that cling to you, as if they do not want to let go. In my case, I traded one uniform for another, from combat medic to VA night security guard. It seemed like a natural transition. Still serving, just on quieter ground. This was in 2015, in North Carolina, at a mid-sized Department of Veterans Affairs hospital. It had modern upgrades, but it still carried the structure of its origins. An old World War II military hospital renovated over the years. You could feel the old bones of the building beneath the fresh paint and plaster walls. We worked 2-man shifts, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., rotating zones every 2 hours. The East Wing, the emergency loop, the long-term care area, the loading zone, and what we called the green. The green was a strip of grass between the original administrative building and the outpatient tower. It was well kept, with rose bushes, concrete benches, and an old flagpole in the center. It was still used. It was still respected. We raised the flag every morning at 6 a.m. and lowered it promptly at 6 p.m. standard protocol. Always folded perfectly. Always by the book. And that flagpole is where this story lives. During my first week on the job, I was assigned to cover the green around 3 a.m. It was a quiet route, with no patient access, no deliveries. Just dim light and the sound of crickets, buzzing like a constant static. That night, as I stepped onto the concrete path beside the grass, I saw him. Someone was standing by the flagpole at parade rest, back straight, military posture, a silhouette against the pole light. I called out, but he did not move. I took another step, my hand on the radio, not my belt. We did not carry weapons, only flashlights and policy. But by the time I reached the middle of the path, he was gone. I blamed it on fatigue, the low light, or maybe some stress-triggered hallucination, or memories that never fully switch off, until it happened again, and then again, always at 3 a.m., always by the flagpole, always saluting. I never saw his face or any details of the uniform, just the silhouette of a man, maybe around 6 feet tall, average build, with his arm raised in a perfect salute, looking toward the flag, never toward me, motionless. The first few times, all it took was a blink and he was gone. But by the third week, I stopped reporting it. I just watched. He never moved, never came closer, never spoke. He only saluted. One night, I decided to test it. I got there early. I sat facing the green at 2:50 a.m. I did not walk, did not switch on my flashlight, did not make a sound. I just waited. At exactly 3 o'clock, the shadow appeared. It did not come from anywhere, did not form or materialize. It was simply there, as if it had always been there. I stood up slowly. I took a few steps forward, expecting it to disappear. It did not. I was about 10 yards away when I stopped. Something inside me said I should not go any closer. Not out of fear, out of respect. So I did the only thing that felt right. I returned the salute, and then it moved. Not towards me, not away. It lowered its arm and faded out. No cold, no flickering lights, no sound. It simply left. The next night, I did the same. Waited, watched, saluted, and again it responded. From then on, every shift when I covered that section, I saluted him at 3 o'clock. He never failed. I did not mention it to the new hires. Most of them did not last long enough on the night shift to notice anything strange. But some of the older veterans, a retired Marine from swing shift, an old infantryman working in administration, said they felt something near the green. None of them had seen him, but they felt it. Eventually, I decided to tell my supervisor, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, logistics, a serious man and a total skeptic when it came to anything supernatural. When I gave him the time and place, he went silent. Then he told me something I had not known. That flagpole had been dedicated in 1953 to a Korean war medic, Staff Sergeant Joseph Hanley. He died in combat after rescuing 7 wounded men under enemy fire. His body was never recovered. His parents asked the VA to make the flagpole his memorial. No plaque, no engraved name, just the flag. I still work there once in a while whenever they are short-staffed. And when I get the night shift, I always walk by the green. Not because I expect to see him, but because I owe him that salute. Whatever that shadow is, call it grief, memory, or something we still do not have words for, it served. And somehow it is still serving. Every night at 3, it stands firm before the flag for the fallen, and maybe also for those of us still trying to make it home. Story 6. We were at Camp Wilson in 29 Palms during a month-long pre-deployment training exercise. If you have ever been there, you know what it is like. Scorching days, freezing nights, dust in your teeth, and a routine that repeats until you are numb to it. Mock villages, live fire ranges, convoy routes. You eat fast, sleep even faster, and learn to ignore the strange. Animals getting into the gear, ghost transmissions on broken radios, or guys who swear they saw things after 36 hours without sleep. But this was not sleep deprivation. It all started in the second week. We had been assigned to a remote corner of the training area. Modular tents, temporary latrines, no comforts. You shower when you can, pull guard in shifts. Nothing new. One morning around 4:30, I got up to use the bathroom before sunrise. It was still dark, the wind was calm, and the moon was visible. As I walked toward the latrine, I saw a pair of combat boots right at the edge of the concrete platform, perfectly lined up, heels together, toes pointed outward, side by side, as if someone had stepped out of them and walked away barefoot. I figured some distracted guy had left them there during the night. That was not unusual. People forget things when they are half asleep or in a hurry. I did not think much of it. Until the next day. The boots were still there. Same place, same position. And the strange part, they were still dry even though it had rained all night. An unusual rain, but steady. We all woke up soaked, the ground covered in mud. But those boots were spotless. No water inside, the laces perfectly tucked in, the soles clean, not a speck of dust clinging to them. They looked freshly issued, as if someone had placed them on brand new concrete. By the third day, people started asking whose they were. No one claimed them. No one had lost a pair. We checked sizes. The closest match belonged to a corporal 2 tenths over, but his boots were tied up under his cot. They were not the same pair. The executive officer asked supply for a new inventory check. Everything was accounted for. Nothing missing. Not even an extra pair. And then they disappeared. On the 4th day, before breakfast, they were gone. We figured somebody had finally picked them up. Mystery solved. But the next morning, they were back. Same place, same orientation. Always dry. Eventually, it became routine. Some people stopped talking about it. Others preferred to ignore it out of superstition. We joked about it a little, of course. We nicknamed them the Ghost Sergeant or Staff Sergeant Standby. You know how military people are. Dark humor helps you swallow just about anything. But the boots kept appearing. Every morning before dawn. Always dry, even when the ground was caked in mud. Until something happened, and what had been strange became unsettling. A private from 2nd Squad fell during the night watch. Nothing serious, just a stumble near the latrine while changing shifts. His rifle got caught on the railing and he split his knee open on the ground. We went to help him, and he swore that he had fallen because he tried to avoid someone standing in the latrine doorway. He said it was a tall figure, faceless, just the outline of a uniform. That he saw the boots first, then the legs, and then nothing. Darkness. And he went down. At the aid station, they blamed it on nerves, fatigue, the low light. But that same night, at the same hour, the boots were not there. For the first time in 10 days, they were gone, and they stayed gone until the morning of the last day of training. We were loading trunks, getting ready to head back to the main complex. I walked past the latrine on my way to the burn pit, and there they were. Dry, perfectly lined up in the exact same spot. No footprints in the dust. No drag marks. No shadows. Just the boots. I did not say anything. Neither did anyone else. That night before lights out, one of the senior guys, Sergeant Masterson, told us the story everyone had been ignoring. In 2003, during a night exercise, a Marine died right there. Heart failure. He collapsed in front of the latrine during the 2nd week of rotation. They did not find him for hours because everyone thought he was on guard duty. His boots were left there when the medics took him away. There was no combat, no enemy attack, no negligence. He simply went. And the strangest part, those boots were never found. They were lost somewhere between the field recovery and transport back to base. They vanished from the inventory. That had happened 12 years before our rotation, and still they kept coming back. I do not claim to know what it was. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe it was coincidence. Or maybe old gear knows how to find its way back when nobody is looking. But I can tell you one thing for certain. No one in my unit ever touched those boots. Not once. We only walked past them, out of habit, out of discipline, or maybe out of respect. Because even on a training ground, there are posts that are never left unguarded. Story 7. We were deployed in northeastern France for a joint NATO readiness exercise, cold weather infantry training. It was late autumn, damp, foggy, silent, the kind of landscape that seems to be holding its breath, as if the land itself had not exhaled since the war ended. The training area had been built around an old World War I trench network, preserved more by the stubbornness of the terrain than by design. Some walls had been reinforced, others filled in, but much of it was still the same as it had been a century earlier. Cracked planks, rusted barbed wire stretched along the forest, craters swallowed by mud and grass. My unit, Canadian Light Infantry, had been assigned a nighttime observation post in that place. Nothing sophisticated, just hold position and keep watch until 3:30. There were 4 of us rotating shifts in pairs. The other 2 were sleeping in bags inside an old dugout shelter that people said had once been occupied by French soldiers back in the 1910s. I had the second shift, from midnight to 2. The wind cut through my gloves, but the silence was worse than the cold. There were no animals, no leaves moving, only the occasional snap of wet wood giving under pressure. 45 minutes in, I heard it. Metal dragging. Not loud, but close. Deliberate. It sounded like someone was drawing the tip of a bayonet through soaked earth. No rush, no clumsiness. Just steady. At first, I thought it was an animal tangled in something, or one of ours moving gear. But there were no footsteps, no voices, no sound of weight shifting. Only that metallic sound over mud. I nudged my buddy, Private Morgan, awake. He sat up and listened. He said he heard nothing, or that it had already stopped. And it had. The sound was gone. And that was worse, because suddenly I felt like something was watching us, as if the darkness had started listening too. We held our position. Nothing moved. No radio calls. No change at any of the posts. I thought maybe it was water seeping through old debris, or my mind filling in gaps after too many hours without proper rest. When you are exhausted, your ears invent things. We finished the shift, woke the next pair, and crawled into the shelter to get some sleep. I slept lightly. Before dawn, I woke up, partly from the cold, partly from the feeling that something had passed very close over my head. Like that shift in the air you feel when someone walks behind you. I did not think much of it. I rolled over and went back to sleep, until morning. When we broke camp, I saw it. 3 scratches across the top of my helmet. Not dents, not branch marks, not wear and tear. They were scratches, parallel, evenly spaced, the uneven trail of metal against Kevlar, as if someone or something had dragged a bayonet across me while I slept. I asked the others. No one had seen any movement. Nothing showed up on the perimeter cameras. No animals had been recorded. And here is the part that stayed with me. On the way back to the rally point, I mentioned what happened to a British soldier who had trained there in previous years. He did not laugh. He did not even seem surprised. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, that place remembers." Then he explained that section of trench had once been part of a forward French position during the Nivelle offensive. Heavy casualties, close combat, bayonet fighting. Dozens of soldiers died on that line during 2 days of resistance. Many were not recovered for weeks, some never. According to the stories, every few years someone training there hears the metallic dragging sound, or wakes up with scratches on a helmet. It never appears in the after-action reports. It is never mentioned officially, but the story gets passed around among the people who have slept in that mud. I am not telling this to scare anyone. It was not a ghost. It was not a vision. It was a sound, a scratch, a moment. But that is how old battlefields are. Sometimes they still patrol on their own. Story 8. Life aboard a ship has its own rhythm. You get used to the structure, the bells, the watch rotations, the meal hours, the steel beneath your boots. You learn to trust the logs, the rosters, the chain of command. On a destroyer, everything is written down, checked twice, and accounted for with precision. That is why what happened on the USS Keller during my second deployment in the Western Pacific never made sense to any of us. We were about 3 weeks out from Yokosuka, patrolling the Philippine Sea. Mid-mission, calm waters, no contacts, routine operations. I was an operations specialist, rotating between the Combat Information Center and deck duties. Small crew. Everybody knew where they belonged. It started as a small inconsistency. During the midnight watch from 12 to 4, we noticed that the entry for the 2 to 4 shift, also known as the dog watch, had been signed before the next sailor even came up to the station. That was not impossible. Sometimes people fill out the log early. But the strange part was that when the next watchstander relieved the post, the logbook already had the full entry completed and signed with unfamiliar initials. The first time we thought it was a mistake. On a paper log, if you make an error, you cross it out and follow standard procedure. But there were no corrections. The entry was clean, orderly, written in firm, neat handwriting. RG. The problem was simple. There was no one with those initials on board. No RG on the crew manifest. No temporary attachment. Nothing in the officer's records. Petty Officer Flores reported it quietly. She thought it was a prank, some sailor trying to start ghost stories. She assumed it would stop soon. It did not. For 7 nights in a row, the 0200 entry appeared again, spotless. Same initials, same ink color. Blue. That was when we noticed the detail about the pen. Next to the clipboard with the log, there was a pen every morning that nobody had brought there. Olive green body, with an anchor engraved on the clip. A Navy-issued model from the 1980s that had gone out of production in 1992. Most of us had only seen them in museum display cases. And yet there it was, next to the book, every dawn. One night, the executive officer ordered the pen replaced before the shift. He set down a brand new black one, taken straight from shipboard supply, and personally signed off on the change. The next morning, blue ink, the initials RG again. That was when they started reviewing old records. Someone remembered something. In 1987, the USS Keller had lost a sailor, Richard Griffin Harland, boatswain's mate 2nd class. He had gone overboard during a storm exercise near Guam. Double watch, same shift. 2 a.m., heavy rain, low visibility. They never recovered him. Missing in action, presumed drowned. He had been on watch when it happened. According to the report, the logbook was found open at 2 o'clock. The ink still fresh, but the initials had never been written. He disappeared just before signing his entry. From then on, an unofficial tradition was born. Never stand watch alone in bad weather. Always 2 men on the dog watch. But over time, crews changed, command rotated, and the story faded away, until the letters RG started appearing again. Our captain never addressed it publicly, but he quietly ordered permanent double coverage for the 2 to 4 watch for the rest of the deployment. and when we made port, the old pen disappeared. Nobody ever saw it again. Look, I do not believe in ghosts. Not in the movie sense. No chains, no cold wind, no flickering lights. But I do believe in duty. And I believe some sailors never leave their post, especially if they disappeared while carrying it out. So when I think back on that cruise, on that watch, on that name we could never trace, I do not feel fear. I feel respect. Because whoever was signing that log was doing his job. And he was doing it, right on time, every night. Story 9. He was one of those men who had seen more than they ever talked about. One of the old guard. Vietnam, Panama, Desert Storm, even the early years of Iraq, by then as a contractor. His name was First Sergeant Wallace, retired, though everyone knew him simply as Top. Every quarter, he gave mentorship talks in the unit. He would sit in the back during pre-deployment briefings, listening without interrupting. He offered advice nobody wanted to hear, until it was already too late. He was not a loud man, and he did not carry himself like some kind of hero. But when he spoke, people listened. One night during a break before our second rotation to Iraq, we invited him to have coffee and talk for a while. The usual pre-deployment conversation, jokes about MRS, complaints about chow hall food, nervous laughter, until someone asked him, "What was the worst war you were ever in?" He did not answer right away. He stared into his cup for a long moment. Then he said something I have never been able to forget. They all had different weather, different terrain, different tactics, but the face was always the same. We did not understand, so we asked him to explain. He looked at us calmly without drama and said, "I have seen the same face in every war I have ever set foot in. Jungle, desert, city. It does not matter. I always see it through the smoke right at the edge of the fire, and it always looks back at me." We thought he meant enemies, or post-traumatic stress disorder, or memories, but he shook his head. "No," he said, "it is not someone I fought. It is not someone I knew. Just a face." And he described it as if it were burned into his memory. A man maybe in his 30s, sallow skin, sharp cheekbones, sunken eyes, thin lips curled into a half smile. Not mocking, he clarified, but as if it knew something he did not. Sometimes he saw it behind a tree in the jungle. Other times beyond the glow of a car bomb. Once in Panama, he saw it reflected in a puddle after an ambush. Only for an instant, but always the same. And the most unsettling part was that he was not the only one. He said that once he mentioned it to a medic in Kuwait, a guy who had served in Somalia. The man froze. He said he had seen the same face while evacuating a wounded ranger under rotor wash at the far end of a hangar. Nobody talked about it officially, but among some people, there was a name for it. The Witness. "It is not a ghost," Top said. "It is not a hallucination. It is a presence. It does not interfere. It does not blink. It only watches, as if it is waiting to see whether you make it home." He told us the first time was in Vietnam, at Firebase Ripcord in 1970. They had already lost 2 men, and artillery was pounding the tree line. In the middle of reloading, he looked up and saw it, the face motionless in the green and gray, watching him through the smoke. He blinked. It was gone. He saw it again in Desert Storm, after a Scud missile hit a supply dump they had just left behind. Through the haze, same expression, same smile, same emptiness in the eyes. And once more in Iraq, in 2004, after an improvised explosive device en route Irish. A secondary blast had thrown bodies across the road. He was 3 Humvees back, dismounted, securing the perimeter. He saw it there, standing beside the smoking wreckage, watching. He never reported it. He never told a commander. He thought that if he ignored it, maybe it would go away, but it did not. He said the last time he saw it was 2 years before he retired, at the funeral of a young soldier who had taken his own life after coming home. Wallace attended out of respect, and when they lowered the casket, he looked toward the cemetery, and the face was there behind a tree. The same eyes, the same half-smile, as if it were taking attendance. That was when, he said, he stopped asking questions. He stopped trying to understand. He just accepted it. Some things follow war, he told us. They do not wear a uniform. They do not bleed. They do not explain themselves. But they are always there, just behind the smoke. Nobody laughed. Nobody treated it like a joke after that, because he was not trying to scare us. He was not telling a ghost story. He was just sharing what he still carried. And ever since that conversation, I would be lying if I said I had not thought about it more than once. During fire missions, when the dust rose, when the horizon shimmered, when the smoke started to clear. Not because I expected to see something, but because deep down, part of me wondered whether he really was the only one who had seen it. Story 10. Military funerals are carried out with precision for a reason. It is not just ceremony. It is discipline. It is legacy. It is the final moment we have to honor someone who swore to serve and fulfilled that oath with their life. I have served on the honor guard. I have performed funerals in the rain, in unbearable heat, and even in snowfall so heavy that the bugler's notes were lost in the wind. When you make a mistake in a ceremony like that, you carry it forever. That is why mistakes are not made, and maybe that is why this story has never left me. It was the funeral of Staff Sergeant Elijah Barnes, Army Infantry, 3 deployments, deceased from complications associated with the Gulf War syndrome. He was a little over 50 years old. Decorated, respected, quiet. Father of 2, husband for 23 years. He was to receive full honors, flag detail, rifle team, and taps at the end. Everything had to be done exactly right. The arrival was flawless. The family had been briefed in advance. The transfer of the casket went without a single mistake. The flag was folded with perfect corners, straight arms, no hesitation. During the rifle salute, my team and I, 7 of us total, executed the 3 volleys without a single interruption. Then we cleared the chambers and collected the shell casings. It is part of the protocol. 3 brass casings, 1 for each volley, are cleaned and placed inside the folded flag before it is presented to the next of kin. A lot of people do not know that, but those casings are not just metal. They represent duty, honor, and country. They are memory. We presented the folded flag to the widow, Mrs. Barnes, a composed, dignified woman. She did not cry during the ceremony. She only held the triangle of cloth against her chest, as if she feared the wind might take it from her. Afterward, once we were back in the vehicle, our team leader checked the inventory. Only 2 casings in the pouch. He looked at me. I looked at the soldier who had collected them. We went back to the gravesite. We checked the ground, the bushes, the position of the salute. Nothing. No sign of the 3rd one. We did not make a scene. We did not say anything to the family. We simply logged it as field loss. It was the first time that it ever happened to me. 3 days later, I got a call from the funeral director. He sounded nervous. He said that morning Mrs. Barnes had stopped by the office. She was carrying something in her hand, a brass casing, unmarked, polished, still warm to the touch. She had found it on the inside windowsill of her home, placed exactly in the center. The window was closed, locked. The screen intact, no footprints outside, no sign of entry. Just the casing resting in direct view of the folded flag on her dresser. She did not scream. She did not panic. She simply stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up and brought it with her. She asked calmly, "Is this the one that was missing?" It was. I recognized it immediately, not by serial number. Blank rounds are not individually tracked, but by a small nick near the rim. The same one I had noticed before the ceremony. It was our casing. There is no regulation for something like that. There is no protocol for a casing lost in the field that reappears days later in the widow's home. We logged it quietly. She chose to keep it separate from the flag. She said she did not want it sealed in a display case or tucked away in a box. She placed it on her nightstand. He always came back when he said he would, she told us. Even now, I think he just wanted me to know he heard me. That stayed with me, because we all talk about how the echo of the rifle salute lingers long after the rifles fall silent. But sometime, the soldier lingers too. Thank you for joining me in these stories. Your support means everything, and I love reading your reactions and personal experiences in the comments. If these stories gave you chills or kept you on the edge of your seat, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe for more unsettling stories. Have you ever experienced something similar, or do you have your own unexplainable story to tell? Share it below. Every story you tell adds a new voice to this community of mystery lovers. And if you know someone who enjoys a good chill, share this video with them. Stay tuned for more chilling stories. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that could happen to any of us. See you in the next one, if you dare.